Help us spread kindness this holiday season. Awaken Pittsburgh is holding our end of year fundraising campaign, and we need your support. Your donation helps us bring mindfulness, compassion, and resilience to schools, workplaces, and communities. Every act of kindness counts. Please donate today at awakenpittsburgh.org. Hello, friends. My name is Stephanie Romero, and I am the founder and executive director of Awaken Pittsburgh. I want to welcome you to our podcast, The Ripple Effect. Awaken Pittsburgh is a nonprofit dedicated to fostering well-being, empathy, and compassion for all by teaching and encouraging mindfulness and meditation practices. I also want to take a moment to let you know that Awaken Pittsburgh offers many other opportunities for practice and connection. For example, you can join our online community, which features a space to more deeply explore the topics we cover with our guests. We have weekly posts to spark thought, practice, and reflection. I hope you will come join us to explore, connect with others, and deepen your practice. You can find out more at awakenpittsburgh.org. Well, Jay, I'm really excited to have you on my podcast and also just to have you share about the work we've been doing together and about the work that you do, which I have been a huge fan of for many, many years now. So welcome and thank you for joining me.
Well, Stephanie, thanks for having me. And likewise, I've been a big fan of your work and Awaken's work for many years as well. And it's been very exciting and really great to collaborate.
Yeah, so I like to start off all of my podcast conversations just asking people about their journey to meditation and mindfulness and the role that that's played in their personal and professional lives.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's been a bit unexpected. You know, I really didn't know much about it at all coming into my professional work. I've been doing work here in Pittsburgh for almost a little over 11 years now. Um, I know early in those years, we had a meeting. I don't remember what year it was, but it was early on, and you shared the work that you're doing, and it sounded uh, i- interesting. It sounded promising. Nothing immediately came of it. Just in my own, personal journey to health and wellness, and I've been through a lot in my own life, and um, I got into mindfulness as healing, personal healing, for things that I experienced, things that I was still processing. I took a mindfulness-based stress reduction class back in maybe that was 2021, and I found it to be very beneficial. And I think shortly thereafter, you came around and Walter Lewis from Home of Children's Village and had a collaboration that you were interested in bringing our parenting program, Parenting While Black, into to support families and parents. And at that time, Parenting While Black had no mindfulness component, nothing that I've worked on, just discipline projects, another big project we have had anything related to mindfulness. But I immediately saw the value knowing what our families had experienced. And I could relate to that on a personal level. I grew up in, you know, inner city neighborhood, single parent. Parents were divorced. I've seen marital stress, economic stress. I've seen community violence and all these things that you don't think about until you really start to get into a reflective space and think about how they've impacted you. And so I had a personal journey um, And then it started to lend itself to the professional work.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I'm curious about is, you know, I was when I was finishing my doctorate at Pitt, I think I attended a lecture you gave. Um, and I was like, I want to work with this guy because the lecture just felt like, and I think it was actually about discipline referrals across Allegheny County and the racial component there, right? And I was a teacher, as you know, for many years and have been working in schools ever since. But really saw it. Like I saw this playing out and I saw the denial of white teachers. I remember once I had a white teacher tell me, it is only a coincidence that this year every discipline referral in our grade is black. That's just a coincidence. I was like, I don't think so. So I would love for you to just say a few words about your scholarly work and also, what led you to start Just Discipline and Parenting While Black, which are two really different things.
Sure, sure. So Just Discipline Project, when I was in school as a kid, attending public schools in the city context, uh, mostly Black and Latinx students in my schools, um, there was a lot of just callous treatment towards students. And I remember an incident where a couple of friends of mine were in class with this teacher that was like just very mean, just mean, flat out mean. Didn't seem like they cared about us. It wasn't that they were strict. They were like seemed like they were trying to hurt our feelings. And being 13-year-olds, one of them passed a note to the other and it said that we're gonna egg her car after school. Now they had no eggs, they had no means to do this, but the note got intercepted. The teacher referred them to the principal and they got expelled from the school. And now this school is also we were in the gifted and talented program. So they essentially got expelled from the gifted and talented program. And their life trajectories have been very different from mine based on that one incident. And there's millions of incidents like that across the country, right? These are real lives. And so but I got into the just discipline work. I'm a former school teacher. I'm a former youth program director in the education space because I understand that schools can make or break kids. They can be places that really do create some equity in this country for marginalized families and kids, or they can exacerbate it. And the schools that do a good job are very relational. I've seen that almost without exception. They're very relational. In the restorative justice work, we got into that because when we started to look at discipline and expulsions and suspensions and the usage in the school to prison pipeline and the way to disrupt that, we traveled. We went to Oakland, California, for example, and saw the work they were doing in the Oakland Unified School District. Shout out David Newsom and his team out there, Sam Passero. And we marveled at that. They were really leveraging relationships and what was called the restorative approach to conflict to create climates that were really conducive to building kids up. And so we saw that work. Heinz Endowments was very interested in this kind of thing. We partnered with them and got some pilot funding to bring it to just one school in the intermediate school in Woodland Hills back in 2017. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were trying to emulate what we'd seen. I had a talented restorative practitioner that we found, Sean Thomas, and we always had a full-time person in the buildings. That was part of what made this effective, and not just some PD that teachers over time get inundated with. And it worked. In 2 years, we saw 25-30% reductions in referrals and suspensions, and we saw academic gains in math and ELA where they had been declining the prior year before we got there. So fast forward, partnered with Children's Hospital for a couple of years to get a couple more sites. And then we got some federal support and support from Arcade Mellon, and now we're in about 18 schools this year doing restorative practices. We have 2 federal clinical trials to see how randomized treatment schools do relative to control schools that are also matched demographically and by suspension records. And so far, and across 2 clinical trials, the treatment schools are outpacing the control schools in academic gains, discipline outcomes, and school climate outcomes. So everything's pointing in the right direction. And that's exciting. It's, I say, we fight for every inch, but it shows that when we put the right supports, the relational supports, uh, kids can thrive, and we can really do really good work, even in school contexts where we're sympathetic to the institutional and structural forces that make our schools under-resourced, that overburden teachers with so much. They're being asked to solve poverty and racism in ways that they might be a part of, but in ways that they did not create, and that they more often than not actively do want to um, do justice by kids. And so we're giving them some tools to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then just shifting to the Parenting While Black program, like maybe you could just say a couple of words about how you started that and your hopes for that program.
Yeah, yeah. So my research, my main body of research is actually in racial identity development and racial socialization. So basically, how do Black and Brown families work in the family context to support their children in a racialized societies? And there's a lot of very compelling research that shows that for Black kids and Latinx kids in particular, when parents help affirm their positive racial identity, when they prepare them effectively for racism and racial coping, that they can thrive or do much better than they would without those supports. And so, what we also saw, though, however, in our own experiences as Black parents, uh, these things are not manualized. These things are not necessarily widely available in the parenting literature, and where they are, they're not reaching families. So we're basically working off the intergenerational knowledge, what our grandparents might have shared with their children and passed down to us. And some of that is great, but we actually find that not everything we learn is that conducive to success in society today. So we wanted to create a resource for Black families by Black families that was going to benefit them immediately as they support their kids, and also as they move through this world as oppressed peoples, and just like their own wellness was always a concern. So we developed PWB, Parenting While Black, back in 20. We wanted to start in 2020. Pandemic nixed that. We had a small grant from Arcade Mellon as part of a larger grant with John Wallace, and myself, and we ran a pilot in 2021. Brought on Cecily Davis, Brandon Phillips as facilitators, and it went very well. It went very well. Parents really loved it. They showed marked increases in their usage of racial socialization strategies that have been validated in the research, and they wanted more. They wanted more. Very, very high numbers of user satisfaction. So we applied for an internal grant in the university to expand the work. And so we did that and built it out to, more than 60, 70 folks. And then you and Walter and our partnership started, and we started to build in the mindfulness components because that was very necessary. One of the things we realized in the early versions of the program, parents have been through a lot, and this space became very cathartic, and there was a lot of expression of trauma, and it was a great communal space to help people feel supported, but we were not giving them tools and how to manage those and what it means for parenting. And at the same time, some of the content is very tough. When we're talking about dealing with race in America, there's a lot of potential triggers. How do we process things in the moment? So it was really a great synergy to start working with Awaken and you all to build in not only the self-care and care for children in terms of mindfulness, wellness, well-being explicitly, but also it had the added benefit of giving us tools to process the content of our own program. And reflexively, I also think that for the awakened parenting content for Black families, it gave real live context to what it means to parent mindfully. What are some of the major challenges? Well, schooling, managing social groups, managing neighborhood stress, managing relational stress. Like there was just immediate flow of some of the triggers that people are dealing with, and it's now immediately met with something they can use to manage them.
Yeah, that was all exciting for me to hear you kind of verbalize what it has meant on your end to be working together. Um, and for Awaken, we've been working with families for a number of years, but we didn't have the kind of supportive curriculum for Black families that you have. So it was really wonderful to be able to take what we've been doing with our families around just social emotional regulation and supporting kids and their own self-care, mental health and well-being, and how important modeling those things are for kids instead of kind of screaming at the kid that they should calm
Mhm.
down, which we've all done.
Yes,
We
yes,
have all
absolutely.
done. No, I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone else that I haven't done myself. We've all had those moments, but really learning that modeling the self-regulation and empathy and compassion is the way to start to build it with our kiddos. So I appreciate hearing you verbalize that. And our topic for today is nurturing. And I think you weren't using that word, but I think both when you were talking about the justice work in schools and when you're talking about families, your programming is nurturing people and it's also teaching people how to nurture others.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the school context, I came into education because I had seen my friends not make it, so to speak. When I got to college, there was no one from my neighborhood, and I went to college in my town. Um, there were very few people like me at on that campus, and it was striking and made me wonder why. And I had the fortune of working in an educational a teaching internship after my junior year at a program it's called Breakthrough. There's actually one in Pittsburgh. I did it in my hometown, Providence. And Breakthrough's approach to learning was very nurturing. It was very much connecting, knowing kids holistically, supporting their needs. They had a motto, more is more. Now, yeah, maybe that's not healthy professionally, but it definitely speaks to when I see a kid, I'm going to do everything I can for them and provide them with support that meet them where they are and take them to their next level. And so that's always been part of my educational philosophy. And I really focus on the um, psychosocial experience of schooling, which is very much about nurturing. One of the challenges going into educational spaces where people are overworked, people don't have the resources at their disposal, they're spent. The adults in those buildings, as you know, are spent. And it's not that they don't care about kids. It's not that they want to hurt kids. I mean, granted, there's bad people in any profession, um, or people that are so hurt that they really shouldn't be there. But by and large, that's not the rank and file of the teaching force. They want to do their best work. They need support and they need to be shown. how to do it when it comes to relationships. And now, I mean, thinking about parenting and transitioning, when you're stressed, nurturing is like one of the first thing that goes out the window. Like you can come home, you can go through the motions, you can feed them dinner, you can get them to bed, but you can emotionally check out when you are not fed, when you are not well. And it's something that is a struggle, especially for parents that are facing economic stress, for single parents that are just overtaxed. And so our parenting program helps me meet families where they're at. I mean, part of that is being in a group. Part of that is that's therapeutic for people just to connect with each other, just to have 90 minutes a week where they do have childcare and to be able to um, be in that space, be heard, feel valued. It gives them strength. They're being nurtured and they can then turn around and nurture. And so all the more so when with mindful connections for Black families, they get this nurturing, um, and they get the self-care tools, they get the mindfulness tools to sustain themselves in really adverse conditions for most of the families we work with.
Yeah, I love that you're naming that burnout and compassion fatigue prevent us from doing the caring that would naturally flow either from a teacher to students or from a mom
Mm,
or dad, a parent to kiddos. And that it's not like someone doesn't care, someone doesn't want to, but emotional exhaustion, burnout, compassion fatigue are real. And I remember when I was originally starting to do my dissertation research into mindfulness and education, and part of that research included, reading studies on teacher burnout, compassion fatigue, and all of that. Um, I was shocked to hear that one of the symptoms of compassion fatigue and burnout is anger,
yeah.
right? But it makes so much sense because even myself, like when I'm really tired, I'm very short fused, right?
Mhm.
Because I just can't, right? And when you're emotionally exhausted, right? And or when you have secondary trauma because the folks you are serving or your own personal situation is such a heavy load emotionally and psychologically, you don't have the resources to self-regulate and be compassionate. It's just you're empty.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about compassion fatigue in parenting, like when you're stressed, you think about uh all you poured in. Your kids have no recognition of what it took to even put that dinner on the table, what your boss said to you that day, what you had to do to keep the lights on at work if you're a leader there. Um, and when they will not eat their carrots, when they will not sit still, when they will not get in the car or get to bed, or they're saying something disrespectful to you, it's very easy to get into an anger space. It's easy to get angry with, first of all, people you can, right? Because there's a power dynamic there. Um, and then there's also the ones that you put the most into can be the biggest triggers. And so that's your children, that can be your partner as well. So yeah, anger is there. And how do we help people recognize where they are? And what's powerful, I think, in the mindfulness work is I can see the anger and then stand apart from it. So I'm getting the tools to say, I feel this way, but this is not me. This is a feeling I'm having right now. If I can find a way to step away from it, I can create enough space to not actually react based on that feeling. And so a lot of the families that come into the to our program, to Mindful Connections for Black Families, they're not familiar with mindfulness. They know there's the program on parenting. Many of them are in weeks 1 and 2 a little skeptical, but it's so immediate that they see, okay, this is something for me. And like I like the phrasing that we often use, that mindfulness practitioners often use, that thank yourself for giving this time to yourself, taking time for yourself, taking a moment to breathe, taking a moment to recognize your thoughts without diving into them. People can very readily start to learn those skills, and they see the immediate value if they do buy in. And most people do. Most people do.
Yeah, so your work is so expansive. You are in social work, right? So we
Mhm.
didn't really name that, but you're actually in the Department of
I'm in
Social
the
Work.
Department of Social Work, yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of fascinating. Just like this, the breadth of your work, you're working with families, you're working with kids and educators. And I guess I really am curious, like what's the thread that holds all of that together with you? Yeah, let's start with that, and then I have another question.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. And just to make it plain for folks who aren't familiar with our team's work, like me personally, I'm trained as an educator professionally. Got my degree was in secondary teaching in English. Um, I went to grad school for developmental psych, basically, at a school of ed. So it's developmental psych in the education context. Um, and then I came into social work. Uh, I think the fit there. I was recruited by Larry Davis, the late great Larry Davis, who was the dean of the School of Social Work and the director of the Center on Race and Social Problems. So social work is inherently interdisciplinary. So social work scholars and practitioners work across fields. So there are school social workers. There's obviously, child welfare social workers. There are medical social workers. So it's not strange for me to be there. I think what the through line is across social work, education, and human development is relationships. Relationships and in context, right? Relating is one. If we think about mental health, quality of relationships, one of the biggest predictors of your mental health. And so relational quality touches on educational outcomes, familial outcomes, of course, professional success, and social work, even more so than education, is as a field missionally committed to understanding a person within their context. In relational context, if we want to get technical and think about Bronfenbrenner, your micro system is your immediate relationships. It's the most important thing from a developmental perspective. And so that is the through line. And when you look at just discipline, very relational. I mean, it's 80% relationships that drive that program. Parenting While Black. As of yet, we do not have a self-paced version of that. It's all in context with others. That's not to say we never will, but right now, the bedrock mechanism behind that is connecting with other people as you learn and grow. And so it's called growing. The actual trademarkable name that we have is Parenting While Black, Growing and Healing Together. Together is in the title.
I love that. And, Awaken tried at one point to do a self-paced online version of one of our courses. And, in our regular courses, as you know, almost everybody completes. People, once they engage with our course, they stay because part of it is the relational and part of it is you're learning skills that make you feel better, right? And who
Right.
doesn't want to feel better? Like we all want to feel better, right? So we don't lose people. When we did the online self-paced course, we had I think it was like 20% completion rate. It was awful. Like
Yeah.
compared to our normal like 90% completion rate, right? It was terrible. So I'm with you on the group environment creates such a, and I'll go back to our
Mhm.
word nurturing. It is a
Yeah.
nurturing environment, being together, feeling heard, feeling seen, and practicing in community, very powerful somehow for us humans.
Yeah.
Very, very, very powerful. Yeah. And I guess I love that you named, so the other question that I was formulating, I'm not sure it's totally formed, but you were referring to what we do at Awaken as providing tools. And that's really the way that I always think about it, is skills and tools that we didn't already have, right? My family was very loving, very supportive. My parents didn't have those skills and tools, they really didn't. They were both from immigrant backgrounds, and a lot of intergenerational trauma in my family, because my family on both sides escaped war, and in my dad's case, severe poverty, no food, like really dramatic.
Mhm.
He came after World War II. In post-war Italy, it was rough, right?
Mhm.
Their town was completely decimated where they lived. So they were escaping that. So a lot of intergenerational
Mhm.
trauma, a lot of yeah, a lot of things to deal with, right? As people, and then immigration in this country, especially if you're not speaking the language, and there's a lot of it's, I don't know if we could call it racial discrimination, but ethnic and linguistic uh,
Mhm.
discrimination. And I know that the skills that I've learned have helped me heal, right?
Mhm.
Some of that intergenerational trauma that I saw in my parents and my grandparents. But I also know, like, when I'm working with kiddos, right, in school, and I guess this is the question, like, I make a connection with restorative justice, holding a circle, building community with skill building with the kids. Because I
Mhm.
feel like when we do circles in schools, we're reconnecting with the kiddos and we're building that community, but sometimes the kids don't have the skills to prevent that behavior from happening again.
Mhm.
Right? They
Yeah.
just don't have that right, like they want to. Kids want to regulate. They want to feel good like we all do, but sometimes they just don't have that skill. So I don't know how that lands for you. And that's what the mindfulness piece, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, I think it's very skill oriented and very much set of tools. When we hear parents reflect on their experience, they talk about specific practices. Um, and so they'll talk about like five-finger breathing or different things they learn that they can do in a moment where they feel elevated. They'll use language like elevated and things that they, I'm sure, were not uh, framing in the way that they do after participating. And even in just the framing, you can see that one of the underlying skills, if you will, is people being able to step back from their own feelings. And so people don't know that they can do that. It's we're so rushed in this world, we're so engulfed that it's hard to really understand that unless that is, you get some exposure to the practice of doing that. And so the other thing I would say as far as really important tools that people develop is self-compassion. Like, and here's where I think, uh, you know, self-compassion is always important, but in this particular case, for African American families who are might be in impoverished situations, might be in families that are disrupted, separated, facing incarceration by a key family member, is to say you're doing the best you can in a world that's just not just. It's not. And so, and you're not alone. So have some compassion for yourself. Maybe other people don't. Maybe your boss doesn't. Maybe your family members don't. They're dealing with their stuff. So don't internalize how they're responding to you. Have some compassion for yourself. Take the time you need for yourself to recharge and re-engage in probably what is relational work that they're doing every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that self-compassion, we could call it self-nurturing, right? The
Yeah,
self-care, the
absolutely.
self-care that often, myself included, gets put at the bottom of the to-do list, right? We get sucked into everything else that has to happen in our lives, and that self-care happens to get put last.
Right, yeah. And I think you have to distinguish self-compassion and self-care from self-pity, right? Because people
Right.
can
Right.
they can know they're in a bad situation and they can kind of buy into it and I mean I do this. Like you buy into it and you get angry about it and that gives you a right to be upset or right to be feel this way or that way. And maybe you're right about it, but ultimately, how are you channeling that? Those feelings is really important because you can dig a deeper hole that when you are not emotionally charged, you look around and say, "Man, I shouldn't have done that," and it can be too late to repair some things. Or you can, I think, in a way, have self-compassion that is still very internal, but also much more productive and much more uh creating some positive outlets for yourself, even within yourself. And so I think, the work that happens in MCBF, it's, when people are journaling, when people are engaging in different kinds of activities and some of the cards and tools that have affirmations, these are things that recognize and meet people where they are, but help them understand you're doing the best that you can. If I can quote um, Sheba, who is the Awaken facilitator and my partner in one of the groups in the Hill District, you have the right to survive. You have the right to survive, and just your being here, making it into this space is an accomplishment, and you should celebrate yourself and thank yourself for that, given everything that's going on outside these doors.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Sheba's always given gems of wisdom.
Yes, indeed.
She is. Well, is there anything, as we're starting to wrap up here, Jay, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you? Something on your mind that you thought was important to share about maybe mindfulness in the work you're doing, or yeah, anything else in your mind?
I just think it's a revelation to be exposed to and engage with the mindfulness work. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are already engaged, but whatever you can do to bring more people in, to even teach simple tools like 1 minute of deep breathing to get people to give themselves a little bit of space, I think is extremely powerful. And bringing more people into the healing, and thinking about how and when those moments come up. And as in parenting, there are moments where we can start teaching our kids from early to build in some of those tools. And then I just highlight, other great work that I think we're on the front end of in our collaboration, the Mindful Connections of Parenting and School Success program that we've done at Clareton, I think was really powerful for parents of all backgrounds to come in and think about parenting strategy and educational priorities and how mindfulness can be a support in trying to meet those while getting specific skills around supporting their children's academic outcomes. So that's exciting. I know we've from the first conversation was about schools and restorative practices and
Yeah.
um, how that these pieces fit together. And so I'm excited to see where we can take that and come full circle. So I appreciate you. I appreciate what Awaken is doing. And I appreciate the listeners engaged in this practice. I'm curious. I'd say you're on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And the collaboration with you and all the folks that work with you has really enriched and expanded what we do and helped us be more culturally relevant and meet people where they're at and with what they need. And so I've
Yes.
I've really appreciated that deeply. And Yeah, it's always wonderful to partner with other people that are doing great work. So that's exciting. So, the question I ask absolutely everyone that's on the podcast is, do you have a favorite mindfulness or meditation resource that you could recommend to the listeners?
Favorite resource?
So, maybe
Hmm.
a book you've read, a podcast you've listened to. I know the Ripple
Um,
Effect, this one is great, but maybe there are more.
what I mean, I will say I took the mindfulness based stress reduction class at UPMC,
Hmm.
University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I don't think it has to be there, but if you are, I mean, one of the advantages of doing that was that it forced me into the practice. Like, it wasn't like I'm gonna find 2 minutes here and there. Like when we met, it was 3 hours. It was you're gonna do different things. There was some yoga in there. There was um a lot of different aspects, and I got exposed to a lot of different things, and I got exposed to really engaging practice. So locally, that was a very powerful experience for me. That really I felt different as it went on. So it was a little bit of an investment, but it was worth it. And again, in a group, so there's accountability. And I think when you're new to it, or even when you're dabbling but not really established, it's like a really good way to get fully immersed and really get grounded in the practice. I'd recommend that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today and yeah, look forward to our continued work together.
Thank you, Stephanie. Likewise, look forward to continuing the collaboration. Thanks for this time.
Say Something Studios.